This is cool. All right, you guys fire ahead.
I'm Wes Tiemann, and I'm a beef pro.
I'm Brett Spader, and I'm a beef pro.
You tell me. I'm hearing my own voice, which makes me nauseous.
I'm Dustin Dean, and I'm a beef pro.
I'm Annie Allen, and I'm a beef pro.
Ow now, brown cow.
Hi, I'm Tracy Bruner, and I'm a beef pro.
I'm Jason King, and I'm a beef pro.
I'm Bob Weber, and I'm a beef pro.
I'm Chris Shivers, and I'm a beef pro.
Yep. All right, welcome to the Beef Pros podcast. My name is Garrett Thomas. As always, I'm joined by my good buddy Ben Spitzer.
Hey, hey.
Today we have the pleasure of having the former executive of the American Brahmin Breeders Association, Chris Shivers. I believe in his part-time gig, he maybe even rode a few bulls in a younger day. So we'll get him to talk about that if possible. So with that being said, Ben, I'll hand it over to you.
So you are not Chris Shivers, the bull rider.
I am not Chris Shivers, the bull rider.
Okay.
I think that we have broken news here.
We have broken news.
For the first time on the Beef Pros podcast.
Yeah, I know. I remember at an NCBA there was I'm going to try and leave out names to protect the innocent. But there was one guy there that was a saddle maker. He was like in the booth for an organization that was giving away a saddle as a raffle at NCBA. And he was convinced that you were Chris Shivers, the bull rider.
Well, Ben, I must tell you that sometimes it's worked to my advantage. I have received fan mail. I have not responded. I did not want to make anything seem as it was not authentic.
Okay.
So, sometimes things like that can work to your favor. However, I think it's always fair to be above board, and thus I've done so.
Recently, where were we at where Andrew was mistaken for somebody? I think we were in Denver back in the spring, and we were sitting in the hotel lobby, and this lady came up after the T-Hart bull sale.
Who was he?
And this lady was convinced that Andrew was this famous person, and he was just being humble and saying that it wasn't him. But to this day, she still thinks that's him, and he told that lady 3 or 4 times, like, "No, ma'am, I'm sorry, I'm not that guy." And she's like, "Oh no, you're just being humble. You're just." And he said, "No, that's not me." I mean, she wanted pictures and autographs.
Well, it sounded fun. Sometimes we just don't want to accept the truth. That's right.
Yeah. So when you go to Vegas, do you get like special treatment at the MGM or?
Again, I told you sometime it comes with benefits.
We'll get past that. But Chris Shivers, glad to have you here. We've wanted to visit with you for quite a while now, but give us a little background on who you are, what you do, kind of I know you've got a new venture here in the last couple months.
I do, and Ben, I do appreciate you putting me on because I'd almost felt left out. I know this has been going for quite some time, and I think the onset of this thing says something about we are beef leaders or something along that line. And
the beef pros,
I felt like, well, I guess it's now been derived that I am no longer a beef leader. But I do appreciate now that I'm somewhat of a has-been that you give me the opportunity to come on the program. But, yeah, to that point, after 17 years of working for the American Brahmin Breeders Association, 13 as executive vice president, I did leave that position at the end of April of 2017. And at that point, I went out to, I guess what we would all like, and we've discussed some today, I'm a consultant. Now, basically, I don't know if that means, well, I'm someone without a job or someone that maybe has extreme knowledge in some certain area and that might be able to benefit others, and I hope it's more of the second. With that, I have taken on 3 full-time clients, and probably at the 1st of September, we'll expand that to 2 additional ones. Also, plan to manage some sales, working with different breeders, or even special projects. Even if they're not full-time clients, we're doing some bull tests, doing some DNA technology work, working for some different organizations, doing just some different special projects, I guess you would call freelancing. So a wide variety of things. So in short, basically what I've done is I've taken my contacts through 17 years of breed association experience and been able to put it to use to benefit a small group of folks that want some more in-depth assistance maybe than what the association could provide. So in short, that's what I'm doing. It is authored or operate under the name Infinity Cattle Services. Okay. And again, it's something that we feel like is very worthwhile, and we look forward to working with a group of people to promote the industry as a whole.
Sure.
Well, take us back to You said you worked for the association for a little while before you became the exec. Why don't you kind of start us at the beginning, what it was like to, come into the Brahman Association as a young person and kind of work your way through some of that stuff?
Well, Garrett, I was very fortunate, just as you were, to have grown up in the Brahman breed. Obviously, you grew up in the Brangus breed, and grew up in their junior program, 4-H and FFA, just like a number of different kids. And then have the opportunity to come and start as Director of Association Services there with ABBA after 4 years of overseeing their junior program, the F1 certification program, the research and breed improvement programs, being able to be named the CEO. And at that time, I was probably the youngest CEO in the country. And I probably learned by fire. It's one of those things where today I guess not sure has been, a lot of people feel comfortable asking you questions. And he said, well, one of the most common is, well, how often did you talk to your board? I said, well, whenever I first started, I talked to them on a daily basis. When I left, I talked to them on about a yearly basis, And I think a lot of that was, there was that comfort level there of, hey, we want to make sure that you know what you're doing. And then after a while, certainly they felt more comfortable and figured out with a track record that I'd had a pretty good handle on things. But, I think the key to that is, one, growing up in a junior organization and being involved, whether it be in a breed association or 4-H or FFA or junior cattlemen or whatever you might be involved in, I think it's always critical that you take those connections and those relationships that you build, and then from that, you take it to the next level. And I think that's how I moved into ABBA, and then by learning the background and the ground floor of the association side with the many programs, and I was able to go to the next level of not only understanding the basics of what an association does, but taking it up to the next portion of managing the financial affairs, strategizing, representing the association on a global level. I mean, not only here domestically, but also internationally. So, I just think it's one of those things that we started with a strong background, and like building a house. I had a good foundation and continued to build on that, and as a result, I was able to have what I think most people would probably agree would be a pretty storied career there at ABBA.
Well, you kind of touched on this, the F1 program that ABBA has set up. I mean, you've obviously seen that program grow and have support over years and years and years. Why do you think, the F1 Tiger Stripe cow is the queen down in the south part of the U.S. What do you attribute the success to that program to? I mean, you've been a part of it for so many years now.
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, science indicates that is the premier female. From the scientific standpoint of heterosis, of taking the Bos taurus and crossing with the Bos indicus, and we're talking about, the two most diverse, cattle breeds or cattle types in the country, and you take those, you combine them, then you get maximum heterosis. And with that, we know that you're getting an increase in growth, production, longevity, all the strong suits from both breeds that are combined. So with that, I think science says this is a tremendous female. The other thing to that, and what I think really strengthens the program from the ABBA standpoint is they actually issue either a certificate or an ear tag that verifies the parentage of those cattle. Not so much anymore, but when I first started ABBA back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there were a lot of what we'd call tiger striped or Brahmin influenced cattle that were being assembled, and then they sold those cattle. But I think through a program, you're able to verify what those genetics are. And I think that's, one, good for the seller to be able to get a premium on that. And I think from the end user, it's even more important that they know when they buy that animal, they're buying it with confidence. And they know that all the positive attributes that we've established in the F1 cross that they're going to receive. And then thus they're able to give a little bit more by buying those verified genetics.
Sure. Well, and we kind of have a diverse listenership, I guess, on the podcast, and we've got some folks that are down in South Texas, Louisiana on the coast, but then we've also got folks in the Dakotas and everywhere else. But it's almost like a Brahmin influenced cattle to them are almost like a zoo novelty to those folks. But maybe give a little bit of the attributes on what Brahmin influenced cattle do, why they're needed down here, and
why they thrive in this part of the country. Because I can even tell you in some of my travels, people. They maybe never seen a Brahmin cow before, and they maybe don't understand how useful they are, and how you have to have some ear down in this part of the country to make those commercial females work.
The Brahmin breed was built out of necessity. When you look at the mid 1800s, early 1900s, the cattle, especially along the Gulf Coast region, which we'd consider to be along the Gulf of Mexico primarily. At that point, I guess they would have been, either Texas Longhorn type cattle or English cattle and some of the early cattle here in the country. And quite simply, they didn't survive. It was because of the heat. It was because of the insects primarily. When you had groups of cattle that mosquitoes would basically overtake or flies, the progressive cattlemen said, we have to do something to be able to get these cattle to survive and thrive down in this part of the world. So with that, they went to some to Brazil, some to Mexico, and then they brought in these different Indian breeds. And what we know today is the American Brahmin is composed of 4 different Indian breeds, that being the Gir, the Gujarat, the Krishna Valley, and the Nellore. So all 4 of those Indian breeds came to the United States. They were mixed in no certain proportion to create what we know today as the American Brahmin. So out of necessity, the breed was built due to the heat tolerance, the insect resistance, and then over a period of time they derived on that they were extremely good mothers, that they were able to survive for a longer time. It's compared to many English breeds. It's typically 50% longer, so you're getting more longevity in terms of how long those cattle will produce. So, I guess all that to say that the breed was created out of necessity by a group of cattlemen along the Gulf Coast region, and then they went through those efforts to be able to bring those genetics into the United States. And the breed was started, or the association was started in 1924, with obviously the cattle being built before that. So the association is approaching its 100-year celebration.
Wow. And prior to the association's formation, it was some of those cattle were bred up from English cattle or Longhorn cattle or something like that.
They
at
would
some
have been.
point way back.
Yeah, that's exactly
and then
right.
A standardized
They would have, yeah. And I don't exactly know what the year was, but at some point we closed the books and says, if you're a Brahmin, then that's what we're going to register. Is we're going to register only cattle from registered sires and dams. But those cattle certainly would have been graded up.
Much like the American Quarter Horse and other breeds.
That's correct.
Similar to
Yep.
that. Okay.
Yep, that's right. From generation stacked on generation.
I get geeked out on the history of breeds, so forgive me.
Well, as we always ask people for interesting stories or things like that, and having worked for a breed association, everybody sitting at the table has that checked off the bucket list. Tell us, maybe some of the more interesting experiences, or if you've got a good story or two about some things that have happened. I know you guys have a great international presence, and you have a big event every year down in Houston at the Livestock Show. And to me, it seems like working at a breed association, that would be a very hectic time. So, if you've got some experiences or even international things like that, I know the focus of the beef cattle short course here in College Station this year is a lot about exporting and things like that. So maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Well, and Garrett, you're exactly correct. Due to the cattle that we raise, there's a tremendous international market. And the emphasis of that is that roughly 80% of the cattle globally are Brahmin or Brahmin-influenced kind of cattle. And that's due largely to where the large lands are and, where the cattle can be put, that primarily they're more tropically regions. So with that, there's a huge export market for Brahmin and Brahmin-influenced cattle. And without question, the Brahmin breed has exported more live cattle than any other beef breed in the United States. And that comes from the standpoint of we're extremely progressive. We utilize technology here, and I think would be considered a global leader in terms of beef cattle production, especially as compared to our South or Central American counterparts. So with that, early on, there were a lot of live cattle that were exported. Through technology and advancements today, there's probably more semen and embryos being sold than maybe live cattle. But as a result of that, we create the good ones here, and then we're able to export those genetics globally. So, yeah, that is one that we're certainly proud of as a breed. In addition to that, we talked briefly about the F1 program, and that's something we've seen grown exponentially. And again, I think it's something that is science indicates that there's some value in these F1 females. From the commercial standpoint, you take her and you can breed her to any kind of bull depending on what the environment demands. And then, so what I say with that is a lot of versatility. You take the F1 cow, you put her in South Texas or in Florida, you breed her to a Brahmin-influenced bull, you can retain those offspring. If you want to take the F1 female to Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, or wherever it might be, and breed her to an Angus or a Hereford or a Charolais or whatever bull you want to use there, then you've got a quarter-blood Brahmin animal that fits into that environment quite well as well. So through that and expanding into different geographic regions, we've seen a lot of upside and growth there in the area of the F1 program. Out of all the things we did at the association, that I would probably be the proudest of would be the advancement in carcass quality. You know, when I came on in 2000, NCBA had just run their carcass merit program, and quite honestly, the Brahmin breed was taking a pretty big hit, and a lot of that was due to tenderness. And we really hit the ground running in 2000, and when I left in 2017, I guess we'd probably harvested close to 2,000 head of purebred Brahmin steers that were all registered. Some 300 sires were represented. As a result of that, in 2003, we were able to launch 6 carcass CPDs, one of those being tenderness, and we were only the second breed, only behind Simmental and Simbra, to be able to launch a tenderness CPD. Now, today, that's fairly common. A lot of breeds do have those tenderness CPDs, but we really saw that as being a real weakness within the breed. As a result, we had the carcass evaluation program that the association sponsored. We launched the tenderness CPD. As a result of that, the breeders began to utilize that information, and we made great strides. Just to kind of give you a barometer of where we came from, that first group we averaged, I think, is 12.5 pounds in 2001. In 2016, which would have been the last program that I would have overseen, we were at 8.5 pounds. So over roughly a little over a 10-year period, we decreased that by 4 pounds of Warner Brasser shear force. So a lot of progress was made there. In addition, obviously, we've pushed the needle on marbling, and continuing just to improve the carcass quality of the cattle. Because in the end, we can call ourselves a maternal breed if that's what we want to do. But in the end, we are a beef breed, and we've got to play our role into the commercial beef industry and do what we can to continue to improve that, because ultimately we're affecting the global industry. We look at that as kind of a short-sighted vision of here domestically, but in the end, we're shipping beef around the world, and we have to do our part to keep improving that product.
Mm-hmm. Give us, we kind of briefly touched on it, but give us a little bit more of your background prior to ABBA, some of the things you did before you got there, and kind of where you grew up and those type of things.
Sure. I grew up in Mississippi, which I guess for some that might be a little odd. Well, you've been in Texas your whole life, it seems like, and I would agree with that. I guess almost half my life now. Mm-hmm. But I did grow up in Mississippi. That's the thing. I didn't grow up on a farm or ranch. It was merely a 4-H and FFA project. At 11 years old, we bought the first Brahmin heifer, and it grew from there into a small herd. I was involved in livestock judging in the 4-H and FFA programs, and ultimately that did help me go to college. I was on a junior college team at Hines Community College and then on a team at Mississippi State, and both of them we had successful runs. I was also on the state FFA livestock champion or state champion livestock judging team. But I probably am growing up, one of the more significant things that I did was get involved in the Mississippi Junior Cattlemen's Association. And with that, we were able to go to different camps and leadership seminars, Youth Beef Industry Congress that I know Garrett's been to. And as a result of that, meet a lot of industry leaders. And I think that's probably one of the significant ththings about these junior programs is it exposes you to a lot of things. Mm-hmm. And it's like somebody told me yesterday, if you ever quit dreaming, then you're never going to improve. Or, you don't have anything to look forward to. And I guess that was the thing is you go and you meet these industry leaders. You say, one day I want to be like those guys. I want to work for a breed association. I want to do whatever it might be. So by doing that, I think it was something that helped push me into who I am today, helped me meet people, and ultimately helped carry me to the next level of going to college and getting involved in that and meeting people who got me into the current occupation that I am in today.
Sure.
Well, as you've transitioned out of the breed association life and been indoctrinated to that, and now you're on your own doing your own thing here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of what that transition's been about, and maybe some of the opportunities you see working within the Brahmin breed, but outside of the breed association. It seems like everybody that we've talked to that's worked in a breed association, there's lots of advantages, but there's also limitations that you can do as a breed association employee that you can't that you maybe can capitalize on when you get outside of that. So tell me what some of your thoughts are, or what your plans are there.
Well, as both you guys can attest to, you learn a lot working for a breed association. I mean, you learn a little bit about a lot of things. You don't learn a lot about a few things. So with that, I think there's a very strong foundation to take out and leave and be able to utilize into my second career. Obviously there's a lot of uncertainty. When you walk out and you flip the lights off for the last time and you say, well, this chapter of my life's over. There's a lot of uncertainty, not knowing where that next paycheck's going to come from, what the future's going to hold for you. But fortunately, just for both of you guys, it's been good. I've taken on a nice group of clients. We're able to do some positive things. And I guess the strong thing about what I'm able to do now is spend more time with those who probably want or need more assistance. As an association, I can speak from ABBA's standpoint. We had close to 2,000 members, and obviously there's many more organizations that are much bigger than that, which both of you guys have been involved in one of them that would be much bigger than that as well. So you're only able to touch those people a little bit. Or when you leave, you're able to take on a group of people that, one, you want to work with, secondly, that have the desire to work with you, and then lastly, that you're able to spend more of your time and resources helping them. Because everybody's different, not everybody has a great commercial bull market, not everybody shows, not everybody's able to have a production sale. So whatever it is, you're able to better cater to their respective needs. So I think that's one of the more exciting things is that I'm able to spend the majority of my time with fewer people, but people who are wanting to go in the positive direction and do some unique things that ultimately will promote the breed and eventually the industry. So I guess if I had to sum all that up, the exciting things is that we're able to really take these folks that have the resources and the want to, and really take them up to the next level and really do some exciting things. It'll ultimately expand the Brahman breed. So in the end, even though I'm not there at ABBA, I still think it's something that hand in hand we can continue to build the breed and strengthen the organization.
Can you speak to a little bit again on Brahman cattle and genetics in general? It seems like the popularity of the polled genetics has taken off recently. Can you give us a little bit? What's the how long has that been coming? What do you foresee that being in the future? Is that something that's going to get really big as far as the selection trait goes, or is that going to be its own deal? From the outside looking in, maybe give those folks a little bit of perspective on that.
I don't think it's any different than any other breed. I think if we can make them good and we can make them polled. When I mean good, I think that there's probably a 3-point focus there. One is quality. When you look at them, do they have the phenotype that we're looking for? Secondly is the carcass quality. So if we can make them look good, we can put some carcass in them and some growth and still take the horns off of them, then I think, there's a lot of potential there. And I think the breed sees that. Much like any breed, once you start placing selection pressure, you can make great improvements. And I would tell you that probably 20 years ago, there weren't a vast number of quality polled Brahmins, and I say that from the standpoint of growth and bone and what phenotype, where today, through selection, and then basically it's good breeders taking quality polled cattle, combining them with some horned cattle that had some positive traits, and there's some really good polled Brahmin cattle out there today. And I think as we continue to go forward, there's going to be some different governmental regulations or animal activist groups and different reasons why we're going to have to change up some of our management schemes. And one of those is dehorning or not dehorning. And there's going to be a place for good quality polled Brahmin cattle, no question.
Well, and I know, speaking about the future, and you would much rather have the folks that you work with be on the cutting edge of these things, but what are some of the things that the Brahmin breed, what are opportunities, what are cutting edge things that you think are out there in addition to polled genetics, or maybe some more improving more on carcass still, or those type things? And I guess perception probably is a big thing with some of the industry that you still fight to some degree, but give me something. I don't want to tell you what to say.
Yeah, no, and I think you're definitely on the right track there. I mean, perception's still something that I think we all have our challenges with. When you look back 30 years ago, and the perception of the Brahmin would have been, well, one, it's wild.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we see Brahmin cattle? Well, in the rodeo. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, I think we've pretty well broken that mystique.
Right.
As the cattle are super gentle. At the same time, we've got an older population. that we have to continue to keep the cattle gentle. So we've gotten past that. Bath sheaths, was something we had a big issue with. That the cattle were bigger, and typically the Brahmin influenced cattle are somewhat bigger. So we've continued to moderate those cattle and making them more functional. Udder and teat quality. Again, we're not the only breed that has that problem, but it's one that we continue to focus on. The carcass traits have probably been the latest trend that we really had to fight and really progressed in. We've worked through all of those. I don't really know what the next big push will be. I think certainly the area of genomics is going to be important, primarily from a selection standpoint of we need something where we can take some hair or some blood or whatever it might be, and at the time of weaning, we're able to know, is this something that we should keep or are we not? Today, we're still basing a lot of our selection on phenotype, which is fine, and it's really rewarded our breed extremely well. But as both of you and a lot of your listeners know, there's a lot that goes on under that hide that dictates what the production and the performance of the animal is going to be. And I think as breeders, we have to continue to select for those tools and those kind of cattle. So I would think if there was anything that needs to be the next wave, it needs to be selection tools that we can kind of shorten that gap and go ahead and identify those cattle earlier in their lifetime and get rid of those that might not have the positive traits that we're selecting for.
Sure.
Well, I know we're kind of getting close to wrapping up here, but I do want to give you a chance to maybe just tell us a little bit more. You said you're working on some special projects or things like that. If you want to expand upon some of the more exciting things that you're doing or talk about some of the clients that you're working with, by all means, we want to hear a little bit more about that for sure.
We're going to appreciate that. I guess we're 3 months into this thing, so it's all relatively new. But I will tell you,
new projects at this point.
Yeah. So they're all good folks, as you might imagine. For the most part, they're newer breeders that one, have the resources, and secondly, they have the want to. And I think that's always a good combination of those who have the desire to improve and will kind of listen to what somebody has to tell them. And we have all been in the purebred livestock business. So you see people come, you see people go. And I think as you look at why people didn't make it, many times they just didn't listen to the right people, or they were taken advantage of, or they just get discouraged early on. And I think a lot of it is we put a lot of money in up front, and then it takes so long to get a return on that investment. So what I would tell you is that the folks that I'm working with, one, we're just trying to get things organized from the standpoint of what cows are working, what cows are not. Bull selection, trying to make sure the genetics, which is going to be the foundation of the whole program, is solid. Secondly is we're trying to build a brand, build a name and a reputation for them, whether it be through social media, whether it be through websites, advertising campaigns. And then from there, as many of you, or both of you know, and all the listeners know, it takes a while to get that next generation on the ground. Sure. So, we're making a lot of strides early on, and then unfortunately we're going to have to kind of rest for a little while and let things kind of play their course. In the meantime, we'll continue to try to market some of these cattle and then open up some other marketing opportunities for other people. I'll have a couple of consignment sales in the spring and working with a couple of different existing breeders with their fall sales and bull tests and some other projects that they're working on. So, it's exciting times. Unfortunately, in the cattle business, it takes a long time to get that next generation on the ground. And until they're born, you can't market them and you can't see what improvements you made. So, we're really working hard now. Then we'll kind of rest up a little bit and really hit it hard in the next couple of years.
Sometimes it's hard to let biology catch up to your mind.
That's correct.
I know I struggle with that myself. But maybe we always ask our guests to give us maybe some words of wisdom, some sage advice to folks that are wanting to get more involved in either seed stock or commercial business, or maybe some tips that you've gleaned along.
Well, even along the way, I know you've had the chance to hire and do those kind of things. There's young people that listen to the show that are in the midst of probably looking for a job and things like that, and that's, we always talk about how it's hard to find good help, and this is a great chance to be able to tell those folks what good help maybe even looks like.
Yeah, and Garrett, and exactly what you said kind of brought one thing to mind. But the thing we talked a lot about today is the cattle business. The thing we've not talked much about is we're in the people business. And I think that's the thing, is even more important to know good, sound people. I mean, go see your neighbor, find out what he's doing, attend field days, attend sales, attend Texas A&M Beef Cattle Short Course or NCBA or State Cattlemen's Convention. There may be more to glean from what other people are doing, and you might make less mistakes by identifying what did not work for people. You know, we always say, well, what works for somebody? And I think it's important to see what works for somebody, but I think it's maybe even more important to identify what didn't work. Because many times there's a lot more that didn't work for somebody that can save you a lot of time and a lot of money as compared to what did work for them. But I think we all focus on, reading the beef bulletins and all the information that the university systems put out and the breed associations about all the science and the technology. But I think the thing to remember is we're on the people business. We've got to sell these cattle to somebody. Ultimately, there's going to be an end consumer who's going to watch how we produce our cattle. We need to continue to be educated. And education is the key to this thing is, one, learn about the next thing that you need to do, but in terms of technology, but at the same time, never lose the basics. It's important to have a sound herd health and nutrition and use positive genetics and all those many things. So if I had in closing words, I would say education and the focusing on the people would be two things that I would really focus on.
Sure. And is there some ways that folks can get a hold of you if they want to get more information,
Sure.
figure out more about what you're doing? Give us a...
Sure. I'll give you two forms of communication. One, and believe it or not, some people don't have a computer, but they do still know how to use the handy telephone.
There you go.
And my cell phone number would be 713-202-1747. And my email is infinity, INFINITY, cattle services with an S, @gmail.com. And they can call for information, or if they still want the old autograph from the legendary Chris Shivers, I'll sure give that as well.
That's awesome. We've really enjoyed having you on. Thanks so much for your friendship over the years.
Absolutely.
And just sitting down with us.
You bet. Well, I greatly appreciate the opportunity, and I'm glad I'm now part of the group and didn't get left out forever.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Beef Pros podcast. Thanks for joining us, and tune in for more content down the road.
Hey friends, thanks for listening to this episode of the Beef Pros podcast. We really enjoyed putting it together and hope you enjoy listening. We would love to have you stop by iTunes or Stitcher and give us a review. Also subscribe there. You can check out beefpros.com and get previous episodes and check out some pictures, and we'll be posting new things throughout the coming weeks and months. And you can also stop by our Facebook page, just search Beef Pros Podcast, and that'll get you right there. We love the feedback. Keep it coming, and let us know what you're looking for in future episodes. So share with your friends, subscribe, give us some feedback, and we really, really appreciate it.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot about that part. I'm Bob Weber, and I'm a Beef Pro.